Hello, Mel. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing okay. I'm doing okay. I was just thinking earlier that I can't believe it's been a week since we watched the Could You Survive on the Breadline show. It feels like that was just a day or two ago, and somehow a whole week has passed. So here we are, having only answered one extra question from our event and staring down the barrel of another episode of this show. How have you been doing?
I've been good. Yeah, basically, I'm not looking forward to tonight's episode. We know
Yeah,
what it'll be. It showed last week what it will actually be. So it's
yeah,
like, but I think it's important that we answer these questions
yeah,
uh, and have our say.
yeah, absolutely. And I think before we keep going, because you've already started, and I want to get straight into a conversation. But before we do that, I want to acknowledge that we're both on stolen country. I'm here on Gadigal land, and are you on Ghana country?
Ghana
Is that
country.
right? Yes. And obviously, across the continent, we pay respect to elders who are the rightful owners of this country, um, pay respect to elders past and present, and thank them for their custodianship of country, not just prior to invasion, but also for the ongoing resistance and care that people are taking for their urban communities and environments, as well as all of those parts of the country that are, you know, experiencing even different different kinds of disadvantages. But I think it's often lost that we have really strong Black communities in our cities who are also dealing with these ongoing horrific effects of colonization. And as I always like to remind folks, that everything that's cooked in our society basically disproportionately hurts First Peoples, but particularly the social security system, the welfare system, poverty. And actually, there was an article in Indigenous X, I think yesterday or the day before, that I will grab and share a link to, about the intersections between over policing, crime rates, imprisonment rates, and poverty in Aboriginal communities. And, basically, the article boils it down to the fact that people are going to keep ending up in jail because they're still poor. So, you know, got to stop over policing, got to stop doing these things. But ultimately, while people are poor, they're going to be desperate. They're going to do things that they may be put in jail for. And when that happens, people die at really distressing rates. So, Mel, just briefly before we get back into the conversation that we almost just started to have, I want to let folks know my name is Kristen. I'm from the Anti Poverty Centre, and I get angry about really shit things that hurt people, whether that is the low rate of unemployment payments and other social security payments, whether it's the total lack of access to appropriate housing for people on super low incomes, or whether it's things that are happening in the social services sector or in the media that either erase our experiences or, take really offensive attitudes to or approaches to looking at our lives or telling our stories. And that happens right across the spectrum of the media. So that's a bit of context for me. Mel, did you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Mel. I'm 40. I've got to remember that I'm 40 now and not 39. Um, I have been on job seeker for almost 6 years now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Basically, I have some chronic health conditions that affect my ability to get work. And we all know with the social security system that most of the time you get told you can't get DSP anyway, so you're
Yeah.
kind of stuck in the rut. But yeah, I have started using my voice to speak up for people in poverty and how we could change things.
Yeah, it's amazing. You reminded me I didn't give that extra bit of context about my situation where I'm one of the very lucky people who managed to actually get on the DSP. It's a fucking miracle, actually. And, uh, it's very weird to be in this situation where I know that I'm getting a payment below the poverty line, and there are very few people on DSP, if any, who have enough to get by. but to feel like this privilege and luxury of having a payment that's just slightly less inadequate than job seeker. And it's hard to like not feel super guilty about that, but I actually think it's really important that we try to remember, if we're always going to compare ourselves to people who are in a shit situation, whether it's slightly less shit or slightly more shit than our own, what we're ultimately doing is hunting for the worst off person, and that person doesn't exist, and that's not the thing we should be comparing ourselves to. We should be comparing ourselves to things that are fair and just and allow us to live. So I got to remind myself of that all the time. But yes, nonetheless, DSP eligibility is a joke, and we've done a lot of work on that too.
But I think at the same time, what you were saying, where you feel guilty, I think instead of comparing situations, everyone on a payment should actually just be joining forces against the government. Like, yes, that's literally what we need to do. Like pensions, job seeker, or study, all need to just join forces at this point and say it's not enough.
Absolutely. And I think it's one thing that I have struggled with while I've been doing advocacy myself, where people get really upset when they feel excluded from the conversation. But if we can remind everyone that, for example, defending the rights of people on job seeker payment is part of defending and advancing the rights of disabled people generally and people on the DSP. For a lot of reasons, one being that lots of disabled people are on job seeker, and those of us on the DSP, I think a lot of people forget that is, you don't just automatically get a higher payment because you're disabled. There's actually like 250,000 people on the job seeker payment who are on job active and have a disability, and then there are like another 250,000 on job seeker but are in the disability employment service. So it's a lot of people who aren't getting onto the DSP. So yeah, there's so many different ways of thinking about it, but I agree, it's really about everyone who's not got enough to live saying none of us have enough to live. And it's the same with youth allowance. I'm really bad. I always use shorthand as the base rate of job seeker, but youth allowance is lower than job seeker, and I haven't forgotten. It's just that, you know, we need to sometimes speak in shorter sentences, which is something I'm not very good at. I have to practice a lot. So I'm just going to jump into our questions. So for context, we are here because we had an event last week before we had our first screening of the SBS show, where we invited people along to talk about the role of the media in the poverty machine. And we got so many great questions, like really, really positive ones as well. We were talking about the media more broadly, and we didn't get through many of those questions. We wanted to make sure we follow up and answer them. So that is why we're here. And I'm just going to go to our question, which is from Crystal. Where is Crystal's question? Thank you, Crystal, whoever you are, by the way. It was a really good one. Okay, so Mel, do you think the media is solutions focused enough?
No. I think the media likes to do stories on job seekers, likes to do stories about poverty, but they don't come up with a solution. They don't say, okay, if we lift people out of poverty, it'll fix health, it'll fix like even crime rates, it'll fix so much, like, but instead they focus on just one aspect of poverty, like the SBS show, for instance.
Yeah,
that's just focused on, okay, they're in poverty, they live in poverty, but they're not saying, you know, raise job seeker. I think there's a few media organisations, though, that I will say has been really, really good. The Guardian, Junkee, where they're actually listening to people, where others need to kind of maybe take a look at what they're doing and go that way as well.
Yeah, I think it is nice when we have some better examples than others. folks might have seen this afternoon, there was an article in Junkie, which I'll also just grab the link to, about this show, actually. And one thing that I really appreciated when I read it was that it offered solutions. So it offered solutions to the concerns we've raised about the show. And I'm just going to grab the link for folks. But basically, Millie Roberts, who wrote the article, had a section in there where she said, you know, it's not hard to see how they could have done better, and listed a bunch of things that are clearly wrong with the show and could have been fixed. And, you know, it was not just a matter of saying people are upset about this show. It was like, here's the things that they could have done differently. So I think that even at its most basic level is a really important thing to be done. And yeah, it's frustrating when I guess we constantly just see not only very superficial coverage, but coverage that almost ignores the fact that there are solutions. So like the idea that poverty just has to exist, right, is pretty prevalent. But like, you would think a journalist could come at that question from saying, well, why do we have this situation that people are in? Like, it's not okay that the government's treating people like this. What is the solution to that? And it's pretty simple. In most cases, you get to the point where it's give people money. Now, that's not the only thing that needs to happen, but in terms of what can be done quickly and overnight, you know, that's a really easy one. But if they never get to that point of like asking the question, what should we do? Then it's kind of just that obvious solution isn't necessarily even going to come up. So I think we do see some reporting where that happens. And I have been asked that question in the past. What about you? I know you've done a few interviews with different journalists. Do you think that they ask you what you think should be done?
No, not really. Like every interview I've done, they've never said what should be done. Even in my interview about when they did raise Job Seeker with the supplement, no one said, do you think it should continue? They said, you know, well, it's going to end. So how does this make you feel? And I was like, well, I think it's cruel and it's wrong. And then, so I've never asked what I think should be done. But yeah, I think the first step is give people more money. And that way, like, there's a push for public housing, which is great. More people need housing. There's homeless. But I'm in public housing and I still can't afford to live. So that means other people are in the same situation. Public housing doesn't necessarily mean that you get more money, or like, I think my rent is 25% of my income. So that's automatically gone. And then I'm left basically with electricity, water, still bills I can't pay. So yeah, it's like there is solutions that the media should be focusing on. It's not just housing, it's about raising the rate. I think if they did it all and joined it all together and just said, you know, this is what needs to happen, that would be great, but they don't. So that's when we need to advocate.
Are you suggesting a holistic response? When you were talking, I was thinking about how we never, like, when people do ask, you know, I often have to simplify it down to give people more money because that is an immediate thing that can be done. But I think having so many people in the media who've never actually had to survive in the system for a long period of time means they actually don't think about the more detailed and complex problems that exist. So, for example, I was speaking to someone today who is really having trouble accessing services because they are homeless and they are moving around all the time. And so even like support services that are supposed to help people living in poverty say, oh, we can't help you because you don't have like you're not always in this one place, in this one community. There are other things that they can't get access to because they don't have a fixed address. You know, things like this that just would never even occur to, I think, most journalists to ask about like what is actually holding you back. So there's so many solutions there, right? Don't require people to have a fixed address to access services. Don't require them to prove they've lived in a particular area. In your case, it could be, well, how about not giving people less money because they're in public housing? Because I bet you most journalists don't know that you can get a little bit more money in your payment if you're in the private rental market, which you can't get if you're in public housing, even though you have to pay rent in public housing. They probably don't even know you have to pay rent in public housing, right? Like,
I've actually seen comments before that insinuate public housing is free, and it's like, no, it's not free. Yeah. Like, it'd be nice if it was, and if we could like house people for nothing. But the fact is, it's not free. Like, you've still got to pay water, you've still got to pay your rent. So like, my rent's higher because my water comes out with my rent. So it's like,
yeah. I think this question also prompted me to think about something that we said last time we chatted, which was this program sort of seems to be saying, or the SBS show, sorry, I just like leapt back to that, seems to be saying, well, can we have these people in this much poverty, or should we try and spend a bit more money? Like, which of these two things should we do? Spend more money or not spend more money to try and help people in poverty? Whereas I really think that, like, if we were going to be solutions focused, if we were going to have media that was solutions focused, they would be coming at it from the question of, is it a good idea or a bad idea to make sure everyone can eat? And if we could all come to the conclusion, I think many people might come to the conclusion that it is a good idea to make sure that everyone can eat. And if we decide that that's a good idea, then surely that leads you down the path of, okay, how would we do that? What would that mean? Right? And then all of a sudden, just by asking that question differently, or asking a different question in the first place, you've naturally put the conversation in a more solutions-oriented kind of direction. I just think there's so many ways.
I 100% agree with that. Like, nobody is going to say that people don't deserve to eat. And
it's funny you should mention that. Today I was reminded of something from the National Youth Commission, which I bet you not a lot of media do much digging into who the National Youth Commission is before they quote them or give them space in the media. But from what I can tell by looking at their board, they're basically a bunch of people who run charities and provide and run job agencies, who have set up, they're all old, by the way, they've set up the National Youth Commission, and they've made all these recommendations, and it literally spells out in their report that income support should not be enough for a healthy life.
See, this is ridiculous.
Yeah, that's the National Youth Commission, right? So although we would like to think everyone would start from the position of, actually, of course, it's a good idea for everyone to have enough to eat, unfortunately, the National Youth Commission does not agree with that. Nonetheless, I think we'd find most people would agree. And if we could get to that starting point, then we might be seeing news and media reporting going in a slightly, as I said before, more solutions-focused direction, to use Crystal's language from her question. So I guess we wanted to keep these quite short. For everyone who might have blocked it out or might not know, Could You Survive on the Breadline is airing its second episode tonight at 8:30 Australian Eastern Standard Time. I'm going to get better at remembering time zones. Sorry, Australian Eastern Daylight Savings Time even. So that's in about 25 minutes for me in Sydney. I don't recommend people watch it if you're feeling not great, because it will make you feel awful. It made me feel awful watching it last week, and I know that's true for a lot of people. But if you are going to watch it, it's on soon. So we're going to wrap up so you have time for a break. We also will be answering another one of the great questions we got last week tomorrow morning. It's a little bit early to accommodate one of the awesome people who's going to be joining me to talk about it. But we'll be doing that from 10:15. I was 10:30, I think, on Sydney time. So Mel, correct me, it's 9:45 in Adelaide then, where you are?
I think, yeah.
I think that's right.
I think it's half an hour.
Yeah,
So
yeah. So that makes sense. And then, oh, here we go. I wrote it down for myself earlier. I thought I did that. Yes. So it's 10:15 in daylight savings time, 9:15 in Brisbane with Eastern Standard, 9:45 in Central Time, and for folks in Perth, I'm sorry, it's too early. You'll just have to catch up later. It's very early. Before your breakfast, maybe you can tune in. But yeah, as I've got there, if you want to have us answer a question that you've got about the media or anything else that we've experienced dealing with the media, please chuck it in the comments. We'll get to it, even if the live session has wrapped up now. We can come back to it some other time. Thank you, anyone and everyone, for watching and commenting. Mel, did you have some more thoughts you wanted to add before we wrap up, either on the question itself or just anything generally?
I think I'm going to watch the show tonight.
Yeah, I feel like I have to. I'm so angry about it
now, and it kind of ignites that anger for me. So that's when I kind of speak out a lot more about it, because I get angry. So I'll watch the show tonight. So if anyone wants to share their thoughts while I'm watching it on Twitter, go for it.
Yeah, I've just popped up your handle, but I've accidentally included Jeremy's handle. Jeremy was supposed to be here, but he'll be here tomorrow. But yes, that's Mel's handle, Artist of Fame. So yeah,
discuss, get angry together.
Yeah, I think one thing Jeremy was saying at the debrief last week after the first episode was just that it felt it was really positive to have that debrief, to be able to get together afterwards, because usually we watch these things and we're isolated and we just have to kind of be by ourselves, feeling quite awful about it. So I'm sorry I did not have the capacity to organize another debrief for tonight. That's partly because I'm encouraging people not to watch it, but yes, I feel like I have to. So we will live tweet, and Mel might write a follow-up tomorrow to her article from last week, which I will also drop in the chat. And then yeah, we'll see what comes of it. Who knows? Maybe they'll surprise us and it'll be totally fabulous. What do you reckon? Chances are high?
No.
All right. Well, with that, I'm going to let you go, Mel. I will talk to you soon, no doubt. And for anyone watching, thank you for coming along and joining us. Thank you, Crystal, for the question. Talk to you soon, folks. Bye.
Bye.